The Michael Jackson biopic landed April 2026. The critics largely did not like it, but this channel did. The channel gives it 9 out of 10, and this video is going to explain both of those positions clearly, fairly, and with specific reasons for each. The critics are not wrong that there are things a film does not do, but they are wrong about whether those things matter for the film this actually is. The channel's position is that Michael knew exactly what it wanted to be, built itself to be exactly that, executed it at a very high level, and will do precisely what it set out to do. Send fans home happy. That is not a small achievement for a film about the most famous entertainer who has ever lived, and it is arguably the only achievement that matters. So next we're going to talk about what the film is and what it is not. There were broadly two types of musical biopic. The first is a deep cut, the Ray Charles model. Ray 2004 was interested in the full complexity of the man, the addiction, the infidelity, the exploitation, the genius sitting alongside the genuine human darkness. It was not comfortable, and it was not designed to be. It was designed to be true. The second is the concert model, the Bohemian Rhapsody model, a film that takes you through the music, gives the emotional arc of the artist's relationship with their craft and their audience. It touches the significant personal moments without dwelling uncomfortably in them, and builds to a sequence that reminds you why you love the artist in the first place. Bohemian Rhapsody made over $1 billion. People saw it multiple times. Some sang in the cinema. The critics were not universally kind. The audience didn't care. Michael is firmly in the second category. It knows it. It commits to it. The film covers Michael's story from the Jackson 5 era through to roughly 1988. Thriller, Bad, the peak of the commercial and artistic achievement. And it does this through music. The songs are the spine of the narrative. The family dynamics, the Joe Jackson pressure, the Motown years, the Quincy Jones partnership, the physical transformation, the loneliness at the center of the most famous person alive. All of these are present, but they are present in the service of the music, not as the ends in themselves. So next we're going to talk about the right choice for this subject. Michael Jackson is a specific case. He's not just a famous musician, he's a phenomenon. The scale of what he achieved, the sales figures, the cultural reach, the physical reinvention of what a performer could be, is so large that trying to contain it within a conventional biographical narrative would reduce it. You cannot explain Michael Jackson through psychology and family dynamics alone. You experience Michael Jackson through the music and the performance. The film understands this. It gives you the experience. 2 hours and 10 minutes is round about the right length. The channel says this without qualification. The film does not outstate its welcome. It does not pad it out, and it easily could have, given that it started life as a 4-hour cut that Lionsgate considered splitting into 2 separate films. What reaches the cinemas is tight, purposeful, and efficiently told. Every scene earns its place. That is harder to achieve than it looks. So next we're going to talk about Jaafar Jackson and the reason the film works. Even the critics who dislike the film largely agree on one thing. Jaafar Jackson is extraordinary in this role, and this channel agrees. And the channel wants to spend some time on what he actually does because it goes beyond mimicry and beyond physical resemblance. The obvious fact is the physical similarity. Jaafar is Michael's nephew and the generic inheritance is visible. The movement, the facial structure, something in the way he occupies the space. But this is not an impression act. An impression is surface level. You capture the mannerisms and the voice and the signature moves, and the audience recognizes what you are doing. But what Jaafar does is different. He captures something on the interior. The particular quality of Michael Jackson's presence, the way he moved through the world as both the most extraordinary person in any room and the most uncomfortable at the same time. It is present in the performance in a way that purely technical mimicry just cannot explain. So now I'll talk about the performance specifically. The channel watches the dance sequences with specific attention. Michael Jackson's movement was not just skilled, it was a specific physical language. A vocabulary of motion that communicated things that words could not. The moonwalk is the famous example, but it is actually one of the simpler elements. The complexity is in the weight distribution, the way he used stillness against motion, the specific quality of his isolators. Jaafar gets this. Not perfectly. How could he be perfect at something that took the original 30 years of refinement, but he gets it in a way that makes the performance feel inhabited rather than performed, and that is a significant achievement. The non-performance scenes are where many biopics with casting coups fail. The actor is extraordinary when doing the famous thing, but then ordinary in the scenes in between. But Jaafar holds the film in the quieter moments too. The loneliness of the character, the gentleness, the quality of being a person whose emotional life was conducted entirely in public while remaining entirely private. These register. The channel does not know what Jaafar Jackson's preparation process was, but the result shows something deeper than watching archive footage. So this channel's verdict on Jaafar. Without Jaafar Jackson, this film does not work. The music alone cannot carry it. The production design alone cannot carry it. The film works because a young man took on one of the most difficult casting challenges in cinema history, playing his uncle, who was a singular human being in a film that his uncle's estate is producing, and delivered something genuinely remarkable. The channel does not say remarkable lightly, but it means it here. So next I'll talk about what the critics said and where they have a point. The negative reviews come from credible critics making real arguments. This channel is not going to dismiss them. It's going to engage with them and explain which ones land and which ones miss. So first, the estate influence charge. The most credible criticism is the one about Jackson's estate involvement in the production. The estate co-produced this film. That is not a secret, and it is not a neutral fact. A film produced by the subject's estate is a film where the subject's estate has input over how the subject is portrayed. That is a legitimate concern for a biographical film. This channel acknowledges it. The result? A film that is consistently warm towards its subject, that presents Michael Jackson as fundamentally a good and gentle man whose extraordinary gifts were accompanied by genuine suffering, is consistent with what you would expect from that arrangement. This channel's response to this charge is not to deny it, but to contextualize it. The film is not claiming to be journalism. It is not claiming to be full and unvarnished truth. It is a film about the artist as the people who loved him experienced him. That is a legitimate film to make. It just needs to be evaluated on those terms rather than on terms of an independent documentary. So next I'll talk about the 1988 cutoff. Several critics note that the film stops in 1988, the bad era, and does not continue into the 1990s and the abuse allegations. This is accurate. This channel also notes something the critics largely acknowledge, but perhaps do not weight appropriately. The production was legally constrained from addressing the allegations directly. That is not a creative choice to ignore inconvenient material. It is the legal reality. The allegations are the subject of active and complex litigation and legal disputes. A film that addressed them in the way the critics wanted would have exposed the production to significant legal liability. This channel has a specific view on this. Nothing has been proven against Michael Jackson in a court of law. The Leaving Neverland documentary made serious allegations. Those allegations are contested. This channel is not going to adjudicate them. What the channel will say is this: marking a film down because it could not legally address contested and unproven allegations is not a fair critical standard. The Elvis Presley biography, Baz Luhrmann's 2022 film, depicted Elvis Presley's relationship with Priscilla Presley, which began when she was 14 years old. That film received no equivalent critical penalty for its handling of that dimension. This channel notes the asymmetry. Next, I'll talk about the hagiography charge, otherwise known as depicting somebody in terms of perfection. Mark Kermode and others describe the film as, quotes, a soulless cash grab, and a hagiographic exercise that turns Jackson into a saint rather than a human being. The Christ-like imagery specifically, the idea that the film positions Jackson as a messianic figure. The channel engages with this directly in the next act, but the broader hagiography charge has some merit and some weaknesses. So first, the merit. The film is consistently sympathetic to its subject. It does not put him in a scene where he's genuinely morally uncomfortable to watch. The humanity in the film is the gentleness and the suffering, rather than the complexity of a character that challenges the audience. That is a real creative limitation. But the weakness in the influence of hagiography? The film is about an artist and his art, and it is about what makes him great. A film that sets out to celebrate and illuminate the craft and the talent of one of the most gifted performers in the history of popular music is not failing by not being a forensic moral examination. It is doing a different thing. The critics are penalising it for not being the film they wanted, rather than evaluating it as the film is. So next I'm going to talk about Margot being, quote, Christ-like, and criticism the channel does not understand. This channel wants to address the Christ-like criticism directly, because it is one that most confused the channel when it first appeared in their reviews. Kevin Marler in The Times and others described the film as portraying Jackson as a messianic figure, a kind of 20th century Jesus. But I watched the film. I do not know what they are talking about. Here is what the film actually does. It portrays a young Michael Jackson being told he has a special gift, a light, a talent, a connection to his audience that goes beyond ordinary skill. It portrays him as genuinely gentle and genuinely childlike. It portrays him as someone whose emotional life was significantly that of a child, even as his professional achievements were those of a once-in-a-century talent. And it shows him moved by contact with people who were moved by him, including in one scene, a fan in a wheelchair. So next I'm going to talk about the channel's question to the critics. This channel asks, how else were they supposed to portray him? That is who Michael Jackson was as a public figure. That is how everybody who knew him described him. The gentleness, the childlike quality, the almost supernatural relationship between him and an audience. These are not hagiographic inventions of the film. They are documented features of the actual person. To portray Michael Jackson as kind and gentle and possessed of an extraordinary special talent is not to turn him into Jesus. It is to accurately portray Michael Jackson. The Christ-like criticism seems to the channel to be a critical mechanism for processing discomfort with the gap between the person the film portrays and the allegations that surround him. If the film makes you feel warmly toward Michael Jackson, if it shows you why hundreds of millions of people loved him and were moved by him, then the critic who believes the allegations must either engage with that complexity or reach a framework that discredits the warm portrayal. Quotes, this hagiography, this Christ-like imagery, this is sainthood. Is that framework? It allows the critic to dismiss the warmth of the portrayal without engaging with whether the warmth is accurate. So next I'll talk about what the film actually portrays. This channel watched a film about a man from Gary, Indiana, who was a child prodigy in a family full of talent and driven by a father who was, by any fair assessment, brutal in his methods, who found music both his identity and his escape, who became the most famous person alive and discovered that the most famous person alive is also the most alone, who retained through all of that a quality of innocence and gentleness that everyone who met him, critics, collaborators, fans, consistently described, who was also, the channel says plainly, a human being about whom serious allegations were made that were never resolved in a court of law. The film portrays the first part of that story. It does not portray the last part of the sentence. The critics penalise it for that omission, but this channel thinks they are asking the wrong question. The question is not, did this film address everything? No, it does not. The question is, did this film do what it set out to do, honestly and well? And this channel's answer is a resounding yes. So next I'll talk about the channel's verdict, 9 out of 10. And I'm going to explain what earns that score and what costs that single point. So what earns the 9? Jaafar Jackson earned 9 on his own, even though the supporting cast were absolutely solid and faultless right throughout. But without Jaafar, the film would be about a 3 over 4. With him, it is an experience. The channel has already covered the performance in detail, but the short version, I sat watching a young man play his uncle, the most famous entertainer who has ever lived, and forgot it was a performance. That does not happen often, but it happened here in this film. The music earns the 9. This channel cannot think of another film in recent memory where the performance sequences produced a physical response in the audience. The urge to move, the involuntary smile at the first bars of a song you've heard 1,000 times before. The film is built around the music the way a concert is built around the set list. You go because you want to hear the songs. You stay because the songs are extraordinary. Michael Jackson's catalogue in a cinema with proper sound system is not a trivial pleasure. It is a significant one. The emotional architecture earns that 9. The film gives you enough of the human story, the Joe Jackson dimension, the loneliness, the cost of being that famous, that young, to make the performance sequences feel earned rather than superficial. You are not just watching a recreation of music videos. You understand something about what it costs to make them. That understanding deepens the experience of watching him perform. That is good filmmaking. So next I go on to what costs the point. So the single point the film does not earn is the point it could not earn, the complexity. Not the abuse allegations. This channel has already addressed why those are not a fair deduction. The complexity of the character that the Ray model produces and the Michael Jackson model. I'm talking about the complexity of character that the Ray model produces and the Michael model does not. Michael Jackson was a human being with a full and complicated interior life. The film gives you the gentleness and the suffering and the talent. It does not give you the darkness or the contradictions that would make the portrayal fully three-dimensional. That is a creative choice and a legitimate one given the film's ambitions, but it is also a limitation, and this channel notes it. So who should see the film? Any Michael Jackson fan should see this film. It is not a complicated recommendation. If you love the music, if you love the performances, if Thriller, Billie Jean, Off the Wall, Man in the Mirror was the soundtrack to any significant moment in your life, see this film. See it in the cinema with the sound up. This channel predicts with confidence that fans will leave having had exactly the experience that they came for. The channel also predicts with equal confidence that some of those fans would have danced, possibly in the aisles. If you are not a Michael Jackson fan, you're looking for a more serious biographical examination of a complicated man's full life, this is just not that film. The film is honest about what it is from its first frame. It is a celebration of an artist. It is a front row seat to the music. It is the Michael Jackson experience delivered through the best possible casting and the most committed possible performance. It is not trying to be anything else. This channel respects a film that knows what it is. So next I'm going to talk about the comparison the channel keeps returning to, Bohemian Rhapsody. The critics were not kind. The film made over $1 billion. People saw it multiple times. Rami Malek won the Oscar. The Live Aid sequence is one of the great cinema experiences of the last decade. No one who loved Queen was disappointed. That film knew what it was. It delivered. This film knows what it is. It delivers. This channel suspects the box office will reflect that. And this channel suspects that 15 years from now, when people talk about musical biopics, Michael 2026 will be mentioned in the same conversation as Bohemian Rhapsody. Not because it is a great film in the Ray sense, because it is a great experience in the Bohemian Rhapsody sense. And that is a real and valuable thing to be. So Michael is in cinemas now, 9 out of 10. The Blue Therapy and Damn It Hope videos are on the channel. Subscribe if you do not want to miss any amazing new content. And thank you.